All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into something pretty fascinating. We're looking at a set of documents that raise a really provocative question. What happens when a religion says it has millions of followers, but the official government census says something, well, completely different? And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of claims made specifically about the Baha'i faith. It really all boils down to one central question, right? How in the world do you accurately count a religion's followers? It's a super tricky problem for any group, and that's the real challenge at the heart of the source materials we're looking at today.
Okay, so the documents we're unpacking really kick things off by zooming in on one specific country, a place where the gap between the internal claims and the official data is, well, it's just staggering. Let's start with the case of India, and wow, this slide really gets right to the heart of it. So on one hand, the documents point to a Baha'i administration claim of 2.2 million followers in India, but on the other hand, you've got the official 2011 Indian government census, and that number is just 4,572. That's not a small gap, it's a chasm, and this enormous discrepancy is pretty much the foundation for the entire analysis we're unpacking.
And to really drive this point home, the source material pulls out this direct quote. It really captures a sense of shock, almost betrayal, This feeling of, we were deceived when those official government numbers finally came out and were put side by side with what had been claimed for years.
All right, so after laying out that bombshell about India, the analysis kind of zooms out. The argument being made is that this isn't just a one-off thing. The source material claims you can see similar patterns in data from all over the world. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the United States. The source points to official Census.gov numbers showing about 28,000 Baha'is in 1990. Okay, then it skyrockets to 84,000 in 2001 before dropping all the way back down to 49,000 by 2008. The source text itself actually adds these little parenthetical notes here, asking things like entry by troops and exodus by troops to really emphasize just how dramatic and strange these swings are. And it doesn't stop there. The documents also highlight more recent trends in the U.S., claiming there's been a steady decline of about 300 to 400 people per year. And at the same time, they point to a growing number of bad addresses on the membership lists, which kind of raises the question, are these all active, findable members? And we see a similar story play out in the United Kingdom. The source again contrasts an internal claim, this time of over 34,000, with the official 2011 UK census, which found just a little over 5,000 people identifying as Baha'i. But then, the analysis throws us a curveball with a really interesting counterexample, New Zealand. The source actually singles out the Baha'i community there for praise. Why? Because according to these documents, they openly acknowledged a decline in their numbers, and that decline lines up pretty closely with the country's official census data. Okay, so we've seen the what, all these big discrepancies in the numbers. But now the source material shifts gears and really starts asking why. It starts to build an argument that these inflated figures aren't just simple mistakes, but that they might be part of a deliberate strategy. So what could possibly be the motivation here? Well, according to the source, it's all about perception. The argument is that having bigger numbers makes the faith look more successful, which can help attract new converts. It helps project influence on the world stage, and in some cases, like in India, it could even help in trying to achieve official minority status. It's really about crafting an image of a vibrant, rapidly growing global religion. And this quote, which the source says comes from a former high-ranking Baha'i official in India, really just lays the whole accusation bare. The stated purpose was, and I'm quoting here, to give a false impression that the Baha'i faith has truly become a world religion.
And this really brings us to the most direct and serious allegation in the source material, that these numbers aren't just happening by accident. The claim is that this is a well-planned strategy coming directly from the central Baha'i administration.
So if it is a strategy, as the source alleges, how would it even work? Well, the documents we're looking at lay out what they claim is a pretty simple three-part process that leads to these hugely inflated membership rolls. Okay, so the process described in the source has three main parts. First, there's a policy of basically never removing anyone. So members who are inactive or have even passed away just stay on the rolls. Second, an incredibly easy entry system, where someone just casually signing a card can be counted as a full-fledged member. And third, certain data collection methods, where, for example, addresses gathered from people taking study courses might just get added to the official membership lists. The source actually gives this alleged policy a name. They call it once a Baha'i, always a Baha'i. The claim is that, essentially, once your name is on the list, it's there for good, unless you take the very formal and probably rare step of writing an official letter to resign from the faith. This means the lists can keep growing and growing, but they very rarely shrink.
So what's the end result of all this, according to the documents? The analysis concludes that behind this facade of huge, inflated numbers, the real story isn't one of growth at all. It's actually a story of significant decline.
And to back up this claim of decline, the documents pull out a really striking figure from Professor Juan Cole of the University of Michigan. He's quoted as having calculated a 50% attrition rate for the Baha'i faith since 1968. Think about that. That would mean half of everyone who joined in that entire period has since left.
And here's what Professor Cole apparently had to say about that number, again, as quoted in the source. He calls 50% a remarkably high number, and says it reveals emphatically that something is indeed wrong, especially when you compare it to how well other religions hold on to their members.
So, this all leads to the source's final, pretty dramatic conclusion. After all this analysis, the documents basically propose that the actual number of active Baha'is around the world, well, it might be closer to just 100,000. That's a far, far cry from the 5 to 7 million figure you often see cited in reference books.
And that's where we'll leave it. We've just unpacked the arguments and the data presented in this particular set of source materials. And it really leaves us with a much bigger question to think about, right? When you see these huge gaps between how a group counts itself and how the outside world counts it, what does that really reveal? What do these different stories tell us, not just about raw numbers, but about a community's identity, its goals, and maybe even how it sees itself in the world?